Sarah Martinez had always been different from other girls in her small Texas town. While her classmates spent their weekends at the mall or gossiping about boys, Sarah was at the local shooting range with her grandfather, learning to handle rifles with precision that would make seasoned hunters jealous. Her steady hands and sharp eyes were gifts that would shape her destiny in ways she never imagined. The trouble started when Sarah turned 18 and made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She walked into Murphy's tattoo parlor on Main Street and asked for something that would mark her forever. The tattoo artist, a burly man named Jake with arms covered in ink, raised his eyebrows when Sarah showed him the design she wanted. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" Jake asked, studying the intricate military insignia she had drawn on a piece of paper. "This ain't exactly what most girls your age come in here asking for." Sarah nodded firmly. The design was a combination of symbols that meant everything to her. A sniper scope, crosshairs intertwined with eagle wings, surrounded by stars that represented the fallen soldiers her grandfather used to tell her about. At the bottom, in elegant script, were the words, "Precision through honor." When Sarah returned home that evening with her new tattoo wrapped in protective film, her family's reaction was exactly what she expected. Her mother gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. Her father shook his head in disappointment. Her younger brother Tommy just stared. Sarah Elizabeth Martinez, her mother said, using her full name the way she did when Sarah was in serious trouble. "What on earth possessed you to get that thing on your arm?" "It's not a thing, Mom," Sarah replied calmly, unwrapping the bandage to reveal the detailed artwork. "It represents everything Grandpa Joe taught me about honor and service." Her father, a construction foreman who had never served in the military but respected those who did, examined the tattoo more closely. "Honey, I know you loved your grandfather, but this looks like military stuff. People might get the wrong idea." "What wrong idea?" Sarah asked, though she already knew what he meant. The real problems began when Sarah started her senior year of high school. Word about her tattoo spread quickly through the hallways of Cedar Ridge High School. Students who had barely noticed her before suddenly had plenty to say about Sarah Martinez and her weird military tattoo. During lunch on her first day back, Sarah sat at her usual table near the windows when she heard snickering from the popular kids' table across the cafeteria. Madison Wells, the head cheerleader with perfect blonde hair and a college scholarship to study fashion design, was pointing in Sarah's direction while whispering to her friends. "I heard she thinks she's some kind of soldier now," Madison said loud enough for Sarah to hear. "Like, seriously? She got that ridiculous tattoo thinking it makes her tough or something." Her friend Jessica laughed. "My dad says girls like that are just trying to get attention. She probably doesn't even know what those symbols mean." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she kept eating her sandwich and pretended not to hear. She had dealt with bullies before, but something about their dismissive laughter cut deeper than usual. They weren't just mocking her tattoo. They were mocking everything it represented. The harassment escalated throughout the week. Students would make comments as Sarah walked down the hallways. Some would salute her mockingly, while others would make shooting gestures with their fingers. The worst part wasn't the teasing itself, but the fact that even some teachers seemed to share the sentiment that Sarah was going through some kind of rebellious phase. Mrs. Henderson, her English teacher, pulled Sarah aside after class one Friday afternoon. "Sarah, I'm concerned about you," she said in the condescending tone adults used when they thought they understood teenagers better than the teenagers understood themselves. "I know losing your grandfather was hard, but acting out isn't the answer. Have you considered talking to the school counselor about removing that tattoo?" Sarah looked at Mrs. Henderson with steady eyes. "It's not coming off, Mrs. Henderson. And I'm not acting out. I'm honoring someone who served his country with distinction." "Honey," Mrs. Henderson said with a patronizing smile, "your grandfather was a lovely man, but he was just a small-town veteran. That tattoo makes it look like you think you're some kind of elite soldier. People are starting to talk." That weekend, Sarah found herself at her grandfather's grave in Cedar Ridge Cemetery, telling him about everything that had happened. She traced the letters on his headstone with her finger, reading the inscription she had memorized years ago. Staff Sergeant Joseph Martinez, United States Army, Bronze Star recipient, beloved grandfather. "They don't understand, Grandpa Joe," she whispered to the granite stone. They think it's just some stupid tattoo. They don't know about the stories you told me, about the promises I made." As she sat there in the quiet cemetery, Sarah remembered one particular conversation she had with her grandfather just months before he died. They had been at the shooting range, and Sarah had just hit 10 consecutive bullseyes from 500 yards with his old hunting rifle. "Sarah, girl," he had said, his eyes bright with pride, "you've got a gift that shouldn't be wasted. These hands, these eyes, this steady heart of yours, they're meant for something bigger than this little town." "Oh, what do you mean, Grandpa?" "I mean you could serve your country with honor, just like your great-uncle Miguel did, just like I tried to do. But you'd do it better than any of us ever could." Now, sitting by his grave, Sarah felt the weight of his words more than ever. The tattoo on her arm wasn't just decoration, it was a promise. A commitment to become something more than what everyone in Cedar Ridge expected her to be. On Monday morning, Sarah walked into school with her head held high. The whispers and stares continued, but something had shifted inside her. When Madison Wells made another snide comment about playing soldier, Sarah simply smiled and walked past. During her free period, Sarah found herself in the school library researching military careers. She read about different branches of service, different specializations, different ways to serve. One article about military snipers caught her attention, describing the precision, dedication, and mental fortitude required for the role. The librarian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson, who had always been kind to Sarah, noticed what she was reading. "Thinking about the military, dear?" she asked quietly. "Maybe," Sarah replied, not wanting to give away too much. "My nephew served in Iraq," Mrs. Patterson said. "He always said the military needs more young people with clear purpose. Most kids these days don't know what they want to do with their lives." That afternoon, as Sarah walked home from school, she passed Murphy's tattoo parlor again. Jake waved at her from inside, and she stopped to chat with him through the open door. "How's that tattoo healing up?" he asked. "Perfect," Sarah said, rolling up her sleeve to show him. Jake nodded approvingly. "You know, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I can usually tell when someone's going to regret their ink. But you wear that tattoo like you earned it." "Maybe I will earn it," Sarah said. "What do you mean?" Sarah looked down at her tattoo, then back at Jake. "Maybe it's not about what I've done. Maybe it's about what I'm going to do." That evening at dinner, Sarah's family was quieter than usual. Her mother kept glancing at her arm, even though the tattoo was covered by her long-sleeved shirt. Finally, her father broke the silence. "Sarah, your mother and I have been talking. We know you're upset about the kids at school making fun of your tattoo, and we want you to know we support you, even if we don't completely understand your choices." "Thanks, Dad," Sarah said, surprised by his words. "But we also want you to think about your future," her mother added. "You're a smart girl with good grades. You could go to college, become a teacher or a nurse or anything you want. Don't let one impulsive decision limit your options." Sarah set down her fork and looked at both her parents. "What if it's not limiting my options? What if it's showing me what my options really are?" Her brother Tommy, who had been listening silently, suddenly spoke up. "I think Sarah's tattoo is cool, and I think the kids at school are just jealous because they don't have anything they believe in enough to put on their body forever." Sarah smiled at her little brother, grateful for his unexpected support. Later that night, alone in her room, Sarah stood in front of her mirror and carefully unwrapped her tattoo. The artwork was healing beautifully, the colors vibrant and the lines crisp. She traced the sniper scope crosshairs with her finger, remembering the steady feeling she got when looking through the scope of her grandfather's rifle. She thought about Madison Wells and her friends, about Mrs. Torr, Henderson's condescending advice about all the people who saw her tattoo as a mistake or a cry for attention. They had no idea what was coming. They had no idea that their laughter today would turn to something very different tomorrow. As Sarah got ready for bed, she made a decision that would change everything. Tomorrow, she would visit the military recruitment office in the next town over. She would take the first step toward proving that her tattoo wasn't just ink on skin, it was a promise she intended to keep. The last thing Sarah did before turning off her light was to look at the framed photo of her grandfather on her nightstand. In the picture, he was young and proud in his army uniform, holding a rifle with the same steady hands he had passed down to her. "Just wait, Grandpa Joe," she whispered. "Just wait until they see what we can really do." Outside her window, Cedar Ridge slept peacefully, unaware that one of their own was about to embark on a journey that would take her far from their small-town expectations and transform her into someone they never imagined she could become. The girl they laughed at for her ridiculous military tattoo was about to become someone whose story would silence every doubter who had ever questioned her commitment to honor and service. The military recruitment office in Millbrook was nothing like Sarah had imagined. She had expected something grand and intimidating, but instead found herself in a small strip mall office between a pizza place and a dry cleaner. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, a compact man with kind eyes and weathered hands, looked up when the bell above the door announced her arrival. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, setting aside the paperwork he had been reviewing. Sarah approached his desk, her heart pounding. "I want to serve my country," she said simply. Sergeant Rodriguez had heard those words thousands of times from young people, seeking direction, adventure, or escape from their current circumstances. But something in Sarah's tone made him look at her more carefully. "Tell me about yourself," he said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Sarah spent the next hour telling him about her grandfather, about her shooting skills, about the mockery she faced at school, and about the tattoo that had started everything. When she rolled up her sleeve to show him the intricate design, Sergeant Rodriguez leaned forward. "Who designed this?" he asked. "I did," Sarah replied. "Based on stories my grandfather told me and things I researched about different military units. These symbols," Rodriguez said, pointing to specific elements of the tattoo, "they're not random, are they? This is a Marine Scout sniper scope reticle. These are Army airborne wings. And this constellation represents the Navy SEAL Trident stars." Sarah nodded, surprised that he recognized the details. "My grandfather served in different capacities during his career. He taught me that true service means understanding and respecting all branches of the military." Sergeant Rodriguez sat back in his chair. "How old are you, Sarah?" 18. "I graduate in 3 months." "And you're interested in becoming a sniper?" "I'm interested in serving where I can be most effective," Sarah said. "If that's as a sniper, then yes." Over the next several weeks, Sarah began the lengthy process of military enlistment. She took the ASVAB test and scored in the 98th percentile. Her physical fitness evaluation revealed natural athletic ability that impressed even the seasoned recruiters. But it was her performance at the shooting range that truly set her apart. "I've never seen anything like it," Sergeant Rodriguez told his colleague after watching Sarah consistently hit targets at distances that challenged experienced marksmen. "This girl has a natural gift that can't be taught." The decision of which branch to join wasn't easy. The Army offered immediate opportunities for sniper training. The Marines promised elite training that would push her to her limits. The Navy discussed possibilities with special operations units. Each branch saw potential in Sarah's unique combination of skills and dedication. Meanwhile, back in Cedar Ridge, Sarah's mysterious absences didn't go unnoticed. She had started driving to Millbrook twice a week for additional fitness training and shooting practice with retired military personnel who volunteered at the recruitment office. Her classmates noticed her increased physical conditioning and wondered what was happening. Madison Wells cornered Sarah in the school parking lot one afternoon. "Where have you been disappearing to?" she demanded. "People are saying you're doing weird military stuff because of that stupid tattoo." Sarah looked at Madison calmly. "I'm preparing for my future," she said. "What future? You're going to play soldier because you have some tattoo?" Madison laughed. "Sarah, you're from Cedar Ridge, Texas. Girls like us don't become soldiers. We go to college, we get married, we have normal lives." "Maybe that's your path," Sarah replied. "But it's not mine." The conversation was overheard by several other students, and soon the story spread throughout the school that Sarah Martinez was actually planning to join the military. The reactions were mixed. Some students thought it was admirable, while others saw it as confirmation that she was trying too hard to be something she wasn't. Mrs. Henderson called Sarah into her office again. "Sarah, I've heard rumors that you're considering military service. I have to ask, is this really about honoring your grandfather, or are you trying to prove something to the people who've been teasing you?" Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. Mrs. Henderson, when people laugh at you for believing in something, you have two choices. You can either let their laughter convince you that you're wrong, or you can let it motivate you to prove that you're right. I've chosen the second option. As spring arrived, Sarah made her final decision. She would join the Army with a guaranteed contract for sniper training, contingent on her successful completion of basic training and advanced individual training. The paperwork was signed, her departure date was set for 2 weeks after graduation, and her future was secured. The news of Sarah's military commitment reached her family during dinner on a Thursday evening in March. Sarah had been waiting for the right moment to tell them, and her acceptance letter had arrived that afternoon. "You did what?" her mother asked, dropping her fork onto her plate. "I enlisted in the Army, Mom. I leave for basic training in June." Her father was quiet for a long moment. "Sarah, are you absolutely sure about this? Military service is dangerous, especially if you're planning to be in combat roles." "I'm sure, Dad. This is what I want to do with my life." Tommy grinned. "My sister's going to be a real soldier." "That's so cool," her mother began crying. "But you're my baby girl. You're supposed to go to college, not run around in some foreign country getting shot at." Sarah reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "Mom, some people are called to teach, some are called to heal, and some are called to serve and protect. This is my calling." The final months of high school passed quickly. Sarah maintained her grades while intensifying her physical training. She ran 5 miles every morning before school, spent afternoons at the gym, and weekends at the shooting range. Her transformation was visible to everyone who knew her. Jake from the tattoo parlor watched Sarah's progress with interest. "You know," he told her one afternoon when she stopped by to show him how well her tattoo had healed, "I've done a lot of military tattoos over the years. Most of them are done after service, to commemorate what someone did. Yours is different. You got yours before you served, like a promise you made to yourself." "That's exactly what it is," Sarah said. "Well, judging by how you've changed over these past months, I'd say you're going to keep that promise." Graduation day arrived with typical small-town fanfare. Sarah walked across the stage to receive her diploma, aware that many people in the audience knew about her upcoming military service. As she shook the principal's hand, she could hear her family cheering from the audience. At the graduation party that night, Sarah found herself surrounded by classmates who wanted to know about her military plans. Some were genuinely curious and supportive, while others seemed to be waiting for her to admit that she was having second thoughts. Madison Wells approached her near the end of the party. "So you're really going through with this military thing?" she asked. "I am," Sarah replied. "Don't you think you're taking this whole tattoo thing too seriously? I mean, it's just a tattoo. You don't have to actually become a soldier because of it." Sarah looked at Madison with a mixture of pity and determination. "You still don't understand, do you? The tattoo didn't make me want to be a soldier. I got the tattoo because I already was a soldier in my heart." 2 weeks later, Sarah's family gathered at the Greyhound station in Millbrook to see her off to basic training. Her single duffel bag contained everything she was allowed to bring, including the framed photo of her grandfather that would remind her why she was embarking on this journey. "Promise me you'll be careful," her mother said through tears. "Promise me you'll make Grandpa Joe proud," her father added. "Promise me you'll come home a hero," Tommy said with the confidence that only little brothers possess. "I promise I'll serve with honor," Sarah replied, hugging each of them. As the bus pulled away from Cedar Ridge, Sarah watched her hometown disappear in the distance. She thought about all the people who had laughed at her tattoo, who had dismissed her dreams, who had tried to convince her that girls from small Texas towns didn't become elite soldiers. The bus ride to Fort Benning, Georgia, gave Sarah time to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She traced the outline of her tattoo through her shirt sleeve, and remembered her grandfather's words about having a gift that shouldn't be wasted. At Fort Benning, Sarah's drill sergeants quickly identified her as someone special. Her marksmanship scores were off the charts, her physical fitness exceeded all standards, and her mental toughness impressed even the most demanding instructors. "Martinez!" Drill Sergeant Williams shouted during her 3rd week of basic training. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My grandfather, Drill Sergeant." "Your grandfather taught you well, soldier. Don't let him down." As Sarah progressed through basic training and into advanced individual training, She began to understand that her journey was about more than proving her critics wrong. She was becoming part of something larger than herself, joining a brotherhood and sisterhood of warriors who understood the true meaning of service and sacrifice. Letters from home kept her connected to Cedar Ridge, but they also reminded her how far she had already traveled from the girl who had been mocked for her tattoo. Tommy wrote about school. Her parents shared news about the town, and occasionally she heard updates about her former classmates. Madison Wells had started college at a state university and was studying business. Jessica was engaged to her high school boyfriend. Most of her graduating class had followed predictable paths that kept them within a few hours of home. Meanwhile, Sarah Martinez was becoming someone that even she had never imagined she could be. The girl with the ridiculous military tattoo was transforming into a warrior whose precision and dedication would soon be tested in ways that would silence every person who had ever doubted her commitment. The final phase of her training was approaching, and with it, the opportunity to prove that her tattoo wasn't just ink on skin. It was a promise she had kept, a dream she had achieved, and a testament to the power of believing in yourself even when no one else believes in you. 2 years had passed since Sarah Martinez left Cedar Ridge with her single duffel bag and a head full of dreams. The shy girl with the mock tattoo had been transformed into Staff Sergeant Sarah Martinez, one of the most skilled snipers in her battalion. Her precision was legendary among her unit, and her calm under pressure had already saved countless lives during her first deployment to Afghanistan. Now, on a scorching hot morning in Kandahar province, Sarah found herself part of a joint operation that would test everything she had learned. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target was meeting with local insurgent leaders in a compound 3 miles from their base. The mission required multiple units working together, including a Navy SEAL team that would handle the primary assault, while Sarah provided overwatch from a concealed position. As Sarah checked her rifle for the 100th time that morning, she thought about the letter she had received from her mother the week before. Apparently, Madison Wells had graduated college and was back in Cedar Ridge working at her father's insurance agency. She was engaged to the quarterback from their high school football team and planning a big wedding. "Your old classmates ask about you sometimes," her mother had written. "They wonder what happened to the girl with the military tattoo. If they could see you now, I think they'd be amazed." Sarah smiled at the memory as she adjusted her scope. If Madison could see her now, crouched on a rooftop in Afghanistan, with her grandfather's dog tags hanging next to her own, she probably wouldn't recognize the quiet girl who had endured months of mockery over a tattoo. "Martinez, you ready up there?" came the voice of Lieutenant Thompson through her radio earpiece. "Ready and waiting, Lieutenant," Sarah replied, settling into her shooting position. The SEAL team was already in position around the compound. Sarah could see their leader, Commander David Kane, coordinating with local Afghan forces through her scope. Kane had a reputation as one of the most respected special operations officers in the theater, known for his tactical brilliance and his ability to bring his people home alive. What Sarah didn't know was that Commander Kane had specifically requested her for this mission. He had heard about the young sniper with the incredible accuracy and steady nerves, and he needed someone he could count on to provide precise fire support if things went wrong. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She controlled her breathing, monitored wind conditions, and mentally calculated distances and angles. Her tattoo, now faded slightly from 2 years of desert sun and hard living, peeked out from under her sleeve. The symbols that had once been mocked by teenagers in a Texas high school now decorated the arm of a combat veteran. At 0800 hours, the operation began. The SEAL team moved with practiced precision toward the compound, while Sarah watched through her scope. Everything was going according to plan until a local shepherd appeared on the hillside, clearly about to alert the insurgents to the approaching Americans. "Martinez, do you see the shepherd at your 2 o'clock? Kane's voice crackled through her radio. "I see him, Commander. Can you take the shot without lethal force? We need him down but not dead." Sarah adjusted her aim slightly. A non-lethal shot at this distance, with wind conditions changing by the minute, required the kind of precision that most snipers couldn't even attempt. But Sarah wasn't most snipers. She squeezed the trigger. The bullet struck the shepherd's water bottle, sending him diving for cover and buying the SEAL team the time they needed to reach their positions undetected. "Outstanding shot, Martinez," Kane said through the radio. "Hold position and keep us covered." For the next hour, Sarah watched the compound through her scope while the SEALs conducted their operation inside. She spotted 2 insurgents trying to escape through a back window and eliminated both threats with shots that would have made her grandfather proud. When a sniper appeared on a distant rooftop and began firing at the SEAL team, Sarah ended the threat with a single shot at nearly 1,000 yards. But the operation took an unexpected turn when intelligence reports came in about a secondary compound where additional hostages were being held. The mission parameters changed rapidly, requiring the SEAL team to split up and assault multiple targets simultaneously. Commander Kane found himself leading a smaller team toward the secondary compound when they came under heavy fire from an entrenched position. His radio operator was hit, his medic was pinned down behind a low wall, and enemy fire was intensifying by the minute. "Martinez, this is Kane." His voice came through Sarah's radio, strained and urgent. "We're taking heavy fire at the secondary compound. Can you see our position?" Sarah swung her scope toward the sound of gunfire and quickly identified Kane's team. They were trapped in an open area with limited cover, facing an enemy position that was expertly concealed and heavily fortified. "I see you, Commander. I count at least 4 enemy positions with overlapping fields of fire. Can you help us out?" Sarah studied the situation through her scope. The enemy positions were well hidden, the angles were difficult, and the range was at the absolute limit of her rifle's effective distance. Making matters worse, Kane's team was dangerously close to the enemy positions, requiring her to make precise shots with zero margin for error. "Commander, I need you to mark your positions with smoke. I can make the shots, but I need to be absolutely sure where your people are." "Copy that. Stand by for smoke." Red smoke began billowing from Kane's position, clearly marking the location of friendly forces. Sarah took a deep breath and began the most challenging shooting of her career. The first shot eliminated an enemy machine gunner who had been keeping Kane's medic pinned down. The second shot took out a sniper who had been targeting Kane himself. The third and fourth shots cleared the remaining enemy positions, allowing the SEAL team to advance and complete their mission. "Martinez," Kane's voice came through the radio after the compound was secured. "I don't know who you are or where you learned to shoot like that, but you just saved my entire team. I owe you a drink when we get back to base." That evening, as Sarah cleaned her rifle and prepared her after-action report, she reflected on how far she had come from the girl who had been mocked for her tattoo. She had proven herself in combat, earned the respect of elite special operations forces, and validated every symbol on her arm through her actions. 3 days later, Sarah was called to the base commander's office. She expected a routine debriefing about the mission, but instead found Commander Kane waiting with several other officers she didn't recognize. "Staff Sergeant Martinez," the base commander said, "Commander Kane has made a very unusual request regarding you." Sarah glanced at Kane, who smiled slightly. "Martinez, I've been in special operations for 15 years, and I've worked with a lot of snipers. What you did out there 3 days ago was the finest precision shooting I've ever witnessed in combat. Thank you, sir, but I was just doing my job. That's exactly why I'm here," Kane said. "My unit is always looking for exceptional individuals who can perform under pressure. Your shooting skills, combined with your tactical awareness and ability to work as part of a team, make you exactly the kind of soldier we need." The base commander leaned forward. "Staff Sergeant Martinez, you're being offered an opportunity to try out for selection to work with special operations units. It's voluntary, and it's extremely demanding, but if you're successful, you'd be working with some of the most elite units in the military." Sarah thought about her grandfather, about the promises she had made, about the tattoo that had started this entire journey. "What would this involve, sir?" Kane answered. "Additional training, more demanding missions, and the opportunity to serve at the highest levels of military operations. You'd be working with SEAL teams, Delta Force, and other special operations units on missions that most soldiers never even hear about. And if I'm not selected, then you continue serving with distinction in your current role, and no one thinks any less of you for trying." Sarah looked down at her arm where her tattoo was hidden under her sleeve. The symbols that had once represented her dreams and aspirations now felt like prophecy fulfilled. But this new opportunity represented something even greater, the chance to serve at the very pinnacle of military excellence. "I'd like to volunteer, sir." Over the next several weeks, Sarah underwent a selection process that pushed her physical and mental capabilities to their absolute limits. She endured psychological evaluations, advanced combat training, and shooting tests that would have been impossible for her to imagine when she was being mocked by high school classmates. The other candidates were all experienced special operations personnel, with years of elite training. Sarah was the only conventional Army soldier, the only woman, and by far the youngest person in the program. Some of the instructors questioned whether she belonged there at all. On the final day of selection, candidates were required to complete a shooting test that simulated the most challenging combat conditions imaginable. Multiple targets at varying distances, changing weather conditions, time pressure, and the added stress of knowing that failure meant immediate dismissal from the program. Sarah was the last candidate to shoot. As she settled into her position, she caught a glimpse of her tattoo and thought about all the people who had doubted her. Madison Wells, who thought girls from small towns couldn't become soldiers. Mrs. Henderson, who thought her military aspirations were just a rebellious phase. Even some of her drill instructors who initially questioned whether she had what it took to serve. When Sarah completed the shooting test with a perfect score, the silence that followed was deafening. The range instructor, a gruff master sergeant who had been testing special operations candidates for over a decade, stared at the targets in disbelief. "In 30 years of military service," he said finally, "I have never seen shooting like that." That evening, Commander Kane found Sarah sitting alone in the mess hall. "Congratulations," he said, sitting across from her. "You passed selection. You're now officially part of the special operations community." "Thank you, sir." Kane studied her for a moment. "Can I ask you something personal? What drives you? I've seen your file, and I know you came from a small town with no military tradition except for your grandfather. What made you choose this path?" Sarah rolled up her sleeve, revealing her tattoo. Kane examined the intricate design with new understanding. "I got this tattoo when I was 18, Sarah said. "Everyone laughed at me. They said girls like me don't become soldiers, that I was just playing dress-up, that I didn't understand what the symbols meant." "But you did understand," Kane said. "I understood that these symbols represent something bigger than myself, something worth dedicating your life to, something worth proving you deserve to wear." Kane nodded slowly. "You know, I've been wondering about something ever since our mission 3 days ago. When things went wrong and my team was in trouble, you didn't hesitate to help us. You took shots that most snipers wouldn't even attempt, and you did it to save people you had never met. That's what soldiers do for each other, sir. That's what special operations soldiers do for each other. The difference is that most people have to be trained to think that way. You already thought that way before you ever put on a uniform." As Sarah prepared for her new assignment with Commander Kane's unit, she thought about writing a letter to her family. How could she possibly explain that the girl they had worried about was now serving with the most elite warriors in the American military? More importantly, how could she explain that the tattoo everyone had mocked was no longer just a promise she had made to herself? It was a promise she had kept, again and again, in the most demanding circumstances imaginable. The girl who had been laughed at for her ridiculous military tattoo was now someone whose precision and courage had earned her a place among the most respected special operations forces in the world. And this was only the beginning of her story. 5 years had passed since Sarah Martinez first walked into the military recruitment office in Millbrook, Texas. Now, Master Sergeant Sarah Martinez was returning to American soil after her 3rd deployment, this time with Commander Kane's elite Special Operations Unit. Her record was pristine, her reputation legendary, and her skills had been proven in some of the most dangerous missions the military had ever undertaken. But Sarah wasn't prepared for the phone call she received 2 days after arriving at Naval Base Coronado in San Diego. "Sarah, honey, is that really you?" Her mother's voice crackled through the phone connection. "Hi, Mom. Yes, it's me. I'm back stateside for a while." "Oh, thank God." "Sarah, something wonderful has happened. Madison Wells is getting married next month, and she specifically asked me to invite you to the wedding. She said she's been thinking about you and wants to see how you're doing." Sarah almost laughed. Madison Wells, the girl who had spent months mocking her military aspirations, now wanted her at her wedding. "Mom, I appreciate the invitation, but I don't think Madison and I have much to say to each other." "Sarah, she's changed. We all have. The whole town is so proud of you. People talk about you all the time. They say you're some kind of special forces hero now." "I'm just doing my job, Mom. Please consider coming home for the wedding. It would mean a lot to everyone, especially to Madison. She's been asking about you for years." Against her better judgment, Sarah agreed to attend the wedding. She requested leave and made arrangements to fly back to Texas, though she had no idea what to expect from a reunion with people who had once dismissed her dreams as foolish teenage rebellion. The flight from San Diego to Dallas gave Sarah time to reflect on how much her life had changed. She was no longer the uncertain teenager who had been mocked for her tattoo. She was now a decorated special operations soldier who had served with distinction in 3 combat deployments. Her precision shooting had saved dozens of lives, and her tactical expertise had been instrumental in some of the military's most sensitive missions. More importantly, she had proven to herself that the symbols on her arm represented more than teenage defiance. They represented a commitment to excellence that she had honored through years of sacrifice and service. When Sarah arrived in Cedar Ridge, she was struck by how small everything seemed. The town that had once felt like her entire world now appeared to be just a tiny dot on the map, a place she had outgrown in ways she was only beginning to understand. Her family's reunion was emotional and overwhelming. Tommy, now 13 years old, stared at his sister in awe. Her parents seemed almost afraid to touch her, as if she might disappear if they hugged her too tightly. "You look different," her mother said, studying Sarah's face. "Stronger, more confident. You look like someone who's seen things the rest of us can't imagine," her father added. Sarah had indeed seen things that most people couldn't imagine. She had witnessed the best and worst of human nature in combat zones around the world. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear. She had discovered that her grandfather's stories about honor and service were more than just tales from an old soldier. They were guidebooks for living a meaningful life. The wedding was held at Cedar Ridge Community Church, the same church where Sarah had been baptized 18 years earlier. As she walked into the sanctuary wearing her dress uniform, conversation stopped and heads turned. Many people recognized her, but few could reconcile their memories of the quiet teenager with the confident woman in military dress blues. Sarah found a seat in the back of the church, hoping to observe the ceremony without drawing too much attention to herself. But as the bride's processional began and Madison Wells appeared at the back of the sanctuary, their eyes met across the crowded room. Madison looked beautiful in her white wedding gown, surrounded by bridesmaids and family members who fussed over every detail of her appearance. But when she saw Sarah sitting quietly in the back row, something changed in her expression. The confident bride who had been commanding everyone's attention suddenly looked vulnerable and uncertain. The ceremony proceeded normally until the reception, when Madison approached Sarah at the table where she was sitting with some family friends. "Sarah Martinez," Madison said, her voice carrying a mixture of surprise and something that might have been regret. "I can't believe you came. Congratulations on your wedding, Madison. You look beautiful." Madison sat down beside Sarah, seemingly oblivious to the other guests who were trying to get her attention. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. I've been thinking about you a lot over the years, especially about how we treated you in high school. Madison, this is your wedding day. Let's not worry about high school." "No, please let me say this." Madison's eyes were filling with tears, threatening her carefully applied makeup. "We were terrible to you. I was terrible to you. When you got that tattoo and said you wanted to serve in the military, I thought you were just trying to get attention or be different." Sarah studied Madison's face, seeing something she had never expected: genuine remorse. "I didn't understand," Madison continued. "I thought girls like us were supposed to follow a certain path. College, marriage, kids, staying close to home. When you chose something different, it scared me, because it made me question whether my path was the only option." Everyone has to choose their own path, Madison. But your path led you to become this amazing person. And my path, Madison gestured around the reception hall filled with people from their small town. My path led me right back to where I started. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy, but I've always wondered what would have happened if I had been brave enough to dream bigger. Before Sarah could respond, they were interrupted by Jake from the tattoo parlor, who had been watching their conversation from across the room. Sarah Martinez, Jake called out as he approached their table. Look who's back in town. How's that tattoo holding up? Sarah smiled and rolled up her sleeve, revealing the tattoo that had started everything. The artwork had aged beautifully, the colors still vibrant despite years of hard living in harsh conditions. Jake examined the tattoo with professional interest. You know what's funny, he said. When you first got this ink, people thought it was just some rebellious phase, but I could tell you meant it. I could tell you understood what these symbols represented. What do you mean? Madison asked, looking at the tattoo more closely than she ever had in high school. Jake pointed to different elements of the design. These aren't random military symbols, Madison. This is a sniper scope reticle from Marine Corps Scout snipers. These are Army airborne wings. And this constellation pattern represents stars from the Navy SEAL Trident. Someone who just wanted to look tough would have gotten a skull, or a flag, or something simple. But Sarah designed this herself when she was 18, Madison said, confused. Exactly, Jake replied. She researched every symbol, understood what each one meant, and created a tattoo that honored different branches of military service. This wasn't rebellion. This was commitment. As Jake walked away, Madison stared at Sarah with new understanding. You really knew what you wanted to do with your life when you got this tattoo, didn't you? I knew I wanted to serve with honor, Sarah said. I just didn't know exactly what form that service would take. And now? What do you do in the military? Sarah hesitated. Most of her work with special operations was classified, and she couldn't discuss specific missions or operations. I work with elite units on sensitive operations, she said carefully. Before Madison could ask more questions, they were approached by Mrs. Henderson, Sarah's former English teacher. The older woman looked shocked to see Sarah at the wedding. Sarah Martinez. Is that really you? Henderson asked. My goodness, look at you in that uniform. You've certainly changed since high school. Hello, Mrs. Henderson. It's good to see you again. I have to admit, Sarah, I owe you an apology. When you were in my class talking about military service, I thought you were going through a rebellious phase. I tried to talk you out of it because I thought you were making a mistake. You were just trying to help, Sarah said diplomatically. No, I was trying to force you into a mold that I thought was appropriate for young women from our town. I should have been encouraging you to follow your dreams instead of trying to talk you out of them. Mrs. Henderson paused, studying Sarah's uniform and the various ribbons and decorations visible on her chest. Can you tell me what you do in the military now? I serve with special operations units, Sarah said simply. Special operations, Mrs. Henderson repeated slowly. Like the Navy SEALs and Army Rangers we read about in the news? Similar units, yes, ma'am. Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, I've taught high school for 35 years, and I've seen thousands of students graduate and go on to various careers, but I've never had a student become part of America's most elite military forces. I'm not just proud of you, I'm in awe of what you've accomplished. As Mrs. Henderson walked away, Madison turned to Sarah with tears in her eyes. I had no idea. When people said you were in special forces, I thought they were exaggerating. But you really are, aren't you? You're one of those elite soldiers we see in movies. Madison, what I do isn't like the movies. It's real and it's serious, and people's lives depend on getting it right. That's exactly what I mean, Madison said. While I was worried about sorority events and finding a husband, you were out there actually making a difference in the world. You were serving your country and saving lives. As the evening wore on, Sarah found herself surrounded by former classmates and town residents who wanted to hear about her military service. She shared what she could while keeping classified information secure, but it became clear that people's perception of her had changed dramatically. Tommy Rodriguez, a classmate who had been one of her few supporters in high school, pulled her aside during the reception. Sarah, I have to tell you something. Remember that day when Madison and her friends were making fun of your tattoo in the cafeteria? I remember. After you left, I told them they were wrong about you. I said you were going to prove them all wrong someday. Madison laughed and said girls like you never amount to anything special. Sarah looked across the room at Madison, who was now surrounded by wedding guests but kept glancing in Sarah's direction. She's been asking about you for years, Tommy continued. Every time someone from our class comes back to town, she asks if they've heard anything about Sarah Martinez. I think she's been feeling guilty about how she treated you. Near the end of the reception, as Sarah prepared to leave, Madison approached her one final time. This time, she was alone and visibly emotional. Sarah, before you go, I need to ask you something. That tattoo that we all made fun of. When you got it, did you already know you were going to become what you are now? Sarah considered the question carefully. I knew I wanted to be worthy of wearing these symbols. I knew I wanted to serve with honor and precision. I didn't know exactly what form that would take, but I knew I was making a promise to myself and to my grandfather's memory. And you kept that promise. I kept that promise. Madison hugged Sarah tightly, her wedding dress rustling against Sarah's uniform. I'm so sorry for laughing at your dreams. I'm sorry for trying to make you feel small, and I'm sorry it took me this long to tell you how wrong I was. Madison, we were kids. We all made mistakes. But your mistakes were about believing in yourself too much, while my mistakes were about not believing in you enough. As Sarah drove away from Cedar Ridge that night, she thought about the conversation with Madison and the reactions of her former classmates. The girl who had been mocked for her ridiculous military tattoo had returned home as someone whose service and sacrifice commanded respect and admiration. But more importantly, she had proven to herself that the symbols on her arm weren't just decoration. They were a commitment she had honored through years of dedicated service. Her tattoo hadn't made her a soldier. Her determination to be worthy of her tattoo had made her a soldier. 3 days later, Sarah reported back to Naval Base Coronado for her next assignment with Commander Kane's unit. As she prepared for another deployment, she received a package from home. Inside was a wedding photo of Madison and her new husband, along with a handwritten note. Sarah, the note read, I wanted you to have this photo as a reminder that some people are brave enough to serve their country with honor, while others are content to serve cake at wedding receptions. Thank you for showing me the difference. Your friend and biggest admirer, Madison. Sarah smiled and placed the photo on her desk next to the picture of her grandfather. The girl who had been laughed at for believing in herself had become a woman whose precision and courage had earned her a place among America's most elite warriors. Her tattoo, once a source of mockery, was now a symbol of promises kept and honor earned through service and sacrifice. Commander Kane found Sarah at her desk later that evening, reviewing mission briefings for their upcoming deployment. How was the wedding? He asked. Enlightening, Sarah replied. Good to be back? Sarah looked down at her tattoo, then at the photos on her desk, then at the mission briefings that represented her future service. Yes, sir. It's good to be back. It's good to be exactly where I belong. And, for the first time since she had gotten her tattoo 7 years earlier, Sarah knew with absolute certainty that she had not only kept every promise the symbols represented, she had exceeded them in ways that even her 18-year-old self had never dared to imagine.